Very few games in the medium seem to receive the universal praise and adoration that the subject of this video does. Every gamer on the planet has their hot takes and unpopular opinions. Here's mine. There will inevitably be titles that are loved by the masses that you think are too mainstream, too artsy, or just plain overrated. But there is one title that to this day I've never seen a single bad thing said about. In fact, when I took to Metacritic to search for negative reviews, the first one was actually a positive review and the second one simply said it wasn't Gex, so my initial thought wasn't completely disproven. I am, of course, talking about Portal. Now, when the discussion inevitably comes around of the best game of all time, I, like most people, tend to jump to my immediate favourites. However, these games are certainly not perfect. They are very much what I would call masterpieces, but they certainly do have their flaws. The Last of Us is a masterpiece of storytelling, but the gameplay is a little bit stiff sometimes, especially when compared to its sequel. Dark Souls is my favourite game of all time, but the second half is certainly weaker than the first. And whilst great for the time, the boss designs and movesets are a little bit simplistic in this day and age. But Portal is probably the closest thing I can think of to a perfect game. The only contender that I can think of to rival it is actually Portal 2. That game refined almost everything about the original title and made it look better, play better, it was funnier, tighter, and just more polished overall. But there is an aspect to Portal 1 that I think the sequel is missing: the mystery thriller. So let's talk about it. So at the start of Portal, you wake to find yourself in a small, square, glass room containing a bed, toilet, and a table with a radio on it. If you look just above the closed door, you see a timer counting down from 1 minute. Eventually you hear a strange robotic voice come from a nearby speaker, and after a while it glitches and becomes distorted.
For your own safety and the safety of others, please refrain from... Por favor, donde fallan. Muchas gracias, te falla, gracias.
The voice quickly returns to normal, counts down from 3, and a portal opens in front of you, allowing you to leave your cell. This is exactly the kind of opening that your typical low-budget horror/pseudo-science fiction thriller film would have. If anybody has seen Cube, Saw, The Platform, Circle, these movies always open with the protagonist waking up in the middle of whatever personal hell they have to go through in their respective movie, with little to no prior knowledge of how or why they are there. I think it helps that our protagonist, Shell, is a typical Valve main character and is completely silent throughout the whole game, which easily allows the player to project themselves onto her and more fully immerse themselves into the experience. The main plot of Portal involves the player having to move through different test chambers using the Aperture Science portal gun to complete puzzles and progress through the facility. During this whole fiasco, it seems that our progress is being monitored as we're guided by the robotic voice from the start in pre-recorded messages. The early sections of the game involve us slowly making our way through these unnaturally clean and clinical white rooms, with the scenery only slightly differing when you enter the lifts at the end of the stages. Whilst not a drastic or significant change, the interiors of these elevators are indeed less clean and maintained than the walls of the actual test chambers. In the first few chambers, the voice will assist us by telling us how to complete the tasks. You may also notice that all of the test chambers have viewing rooms behind observation windows and that there are cameras up on the walls, implying that somebody should be watching you go through these tests. However, we don't see anybody. All of the offices are empty, and the only other sign of intelligent life seems to be these pre-recorded messages that were left for us. This whole setup should already be ringing alarm bells that something isn't quite right here. After all, what is the point of all of this? The facility was clearly made for one thing: testing patients. The whole place was created to perform tests. It was made for people, which only begs the question, where are all the people? Are they dead somehow? Well, there should be bodies lying around. Were they all evacuated, or did they leave in a hurry? Well, then you'd expect there to be a mess of some sort or a sign that there was a panic. Why weren't you also evacuated or killed? These are questions that will be answered later, but for now, they serve not only as a fantastic hook to keep you engaged and jumping to conclusions, but also use environmental storytelling to set the tone and communicate everything that you've learned so far. The voice has been guiding you through these puzzles, but hasn't really provided any useful information about the actual setting. Everything you know at this moment, you've established yourself by using your eyes and your brain. Since I mentioned it earlier already, Portal relies on visual clues to tell its story in the same way that Dark Souls does, at least in the beginning. Portal is the Dark Souls of video games. After the first 5 or so test chambers, the voice's dialogue reveals that maybe this place isn't quite as safe as it initially seemed.
Please note that we have added a consequence for failure. Any contact with the chamber floor will result in an unsatisfactory mark on your official testing record, followed by death. Good luck.
Between chambers 9 through 11, it starts to become apparent that the voice is not an automated message that's triggered to play as you enter the room, but instead is something possibly sentient. It warns us that the next test is impossible and that there is no point in trying to solve it. However, as time progresses, she will keep reminding you that it's unsolvable and that you should just stop attempting to beat it.
Frankly, this chamber was a mistake. If we were you, we would quit now. Quit now, and cake will be served immediately.
This moment here is hugely significant. Not only is this the first true moment where we may suspect that the voice is not entirely what it seems, but it's also the first mention of the cake. The cake, rather surprisingly, becomes a pretty big deal later on as it ends up being the foundation of the debate that really determines the morality of the test center. More details on this when we get there. Shortly after, around test chamber 12, the voice starts to let slip that she may not have our best interest at heart.
If you become lightheaded from thirst, feel free to pass out.
So at this point, I think that most of us are on guard and don't really trust her to take good care of us. But the line that I find most interesting is,
when the testing is over, you will be missed.
This line in particular can mean one of two things. Either it's a weak attempt at establishing rapport with us and have us believe that she is fond of us in some way, or since the purpose of the facility is to test subjects, when we're finished, we no longer serve a purpose. We will be missed? That sounds awfully sinister if you ask me. Eventually, the voice seems to realise that she's let too much slip and tries to backpedal a little bit to re-establish some trust. She tells us cake and grief counselling will be available at the conclusion of the test. Soon after, around test chamber 16, we discover a room with a bloody note on the floor reading "Help," and one of the wall panels protruding out a little bit. If we crouch down and investigate behind it, we discover a small cubby room where it's clear that somebody has been living inside. Now, despite this being such a short sequence and not really contributing much to the gameplay, it completely recontextualizes what we know up to this point. Sort of. Somebody, likely human, has been hiding inside of the walls of the facility and moving around through the pipes and back rooms. We find scrawlings on the wall of someone clearly deranged, but what do the messages say? There's a series of tally marks, presumably indicating days spent in hiding, a drawing of the cameras found throughout the facility, and a note stating, "She's watching you," and "the cake is a lie." This unseen character has pretty much confirmed what we were already expecting at this point, that we were being strung along with false promises and once we had completed our tests, would become obsolete for the facility. But I do also find it interesting that this person has clearly found a blind spot in the facility's security. This area inside of the walls is far less clinical and more industrial looking than the test chambers themselves. You could look at this as a commentary on what goes on behind the scenes at large corporate organisations, with the very clean-cut, polished interior on show for the public, while there are plenty of things going on behind the scenes that we don't get to see. Or you could just keep it focused on the narrative going on in front of you and come to the conclusion that the voice only has control of the test chambers. Once you leave the confines of the area that she has influence over, she no longer has any power over you. She can't watch you anymore or manipulate your path. For the first time in the game, you are free. Albeit in a dead-end room. Even the colour balance seems to hint at this, with the white walls of the facility having a slight bluey hint to it, which represents the cold and lifeless machinations of this AI-led building. However, once you escape these confines and find the first true sense of other human life, we're introduced to a far warmer orange tone, which symbolises the human psyche in the scenario. In fact, at the start of the game, when you first get your hand on the portal gun, you're only able to open the blue portal. The orange side was always predetermined by the facility. It was only when you upgrade the gun and establish control of the orange portal, or the freedom of humanity over the restricted binary nature of AI, that we can then rely on our own intuition to solve the puzzles. Whereas before, the voice was in complete control of our progression, as she had influence over one end of the portal and could have chosen to not present it altogether if she so desired. Since the hideout doesn't lead anywhere, we're forced to progress through to the next test chamber, number 17. Here the voice provides us with a new tool to progress through the test, the weighted companion cube.
This weighted companion cube will accompany you through the test chamber. Please take care of it. The symptoms most commonly produced by enrichment center testing are superstition, perceiving inanimate objects as alive, and hallucinations.
The companion cube is basically the same as the storage cubes that we've used a few times already, but has a pink heart in the center in place of the Aperture Science logo. Throughout this test, we use the companion cube to boost ourselves to higher ledges, deflect harmful balls of energy, and weigh down buttons, until we come across another hideout tucked away behind a wall panel. This time we can see that the unknown survivor has clearly been through a similar ordeal that we have, and has written some illegible things on the wall about the companion cube. One of the things that we can make out is, though man and earth are gone, I thought the cube would last forever. I was wrong. Another is, not in cruelty, not in wrath, the Reaper came today, an angel visited this grey path, and took the cube away. Clearly this person formed a deep bond or attachment to their companion cube, and something inevitably happened to take it away from him. A few moments later, the voice instructs you to euthanize your companion cube by dropping it into an incinerator.
You did it. The weighted companion cube certainly brought you good luck. However, it cannot accompany you for the rest of the test and, unfortunately, must be euthanized. Please escort your companion cube to the Aperture Science Emergency Intelligence Incinerator.
And so it goes, you physically cannot proceed to the next room until you drop the companion cube to its destruction. Eventually, after passing all of the tests that the facility has to throw at you, the disembodied voice has you moving on a slow platform towards a pit of fire. She thanks us for our participation and leaves us to our fate. Until we escape thanks to the portal gun and slip away through the maintenance areas, once again the colour orange signifying our salvation from her clutches. After trying to make our getaway, we discover a large chamber where the hardware of the voice hangs above the room. This is the Genetic Lifeform and Disk Operating System, otherwise known as GLaDOS. She is the artificial intelligence that runs the facility and has been herding us to our inevitable slaughter. During the encounter, a small piece of GLaDOS falls onto the ground, which we proceed to drop into the nearby incinerator and destroy. Doing this definitely has a significant impact on the AI, as she reveals it to be a morality core that the Aperture Science employees allegedly installed after she flooded the enrichment center with a deadly neurotoxin. So GLaDOS clearly wants Shell dead for some reason, but was prevented from just killing her outright because of the morality core. She was forced to go through the motions and have us complete tests, as this was her primary programming. And now, because we've destroyed the very thing that stopped her from killing us on sight, she begins to flood the facility with the very same neurotoxin that killed all of the employees. So the final battle consists of GLaDOS leaking poisonous gas and trying to fire projectiles at us, which we redirect back at her through use of the portal gun. Every time she gets hit, another core drops down from a harness, which we in turn destroy. We proceed to incinerate the intelligence core, which causes her to resort to childish insults and mockery.
That's you. That's how dumb you sound.
the curiosity core, and finally the emotion core. Eventually, a malfunction tears the room apart and teleports everything to the surface of the outside world. GLaDOS's remains are scattered along the floor, and Shell is finally free. Until she starts getting pulled from the wreckage by an unseen presence and is dragged back into the depths of the facility. So by the time that you reach the end of the game, all of the burning questions in your mind from the beginning will likely be answered. What is this place? Why are we doing this? What happened to all of the people? Who is the mysterious voice? But my favourite aspect of the original Portal is the answers that Valve chose not to give us. By playing the game alone, we never receive an answer to who left the messages in the hidden rooms. Were they the result of previous test subjects slowly losing their mind at the thought of never escaping this place? After all, imagine yourself in this situation. 16 chambers in, each gradually becoming larger in size and grander in scope, more complicated. You don't know how many rooms there are. How big is this place? What if you ended up 100 chambers deep and finally reach a puzzle that you can't solve? How will you escape? What if you can't? Will you be left to die of starvation or dehydration? These thoughts could be enough for some to choose to take matters into their own hands and end their lives on their own terms. A morbid thought for sure, but we don't know. Portal was hardly intended to be a horror game, but the atmosphere and tone is developed so well that it honestly could be one. Now, if you've played the sequel or even quickly skimmed the internet, then you'll likely have heard of the Rat Man. If you read through the Portal 2 Lab Rat comic book released in April of 2011, it's revealed that the mysterious stranger hiding in the walls is Doug Ratman, a lab worker at Aperture Science with a history of schizophrenia. At some point in time, Ratman had survived GLaDOS's attempt to murder the employees of Aperture Science, and then spent the rest of his life crawling through the maintenance areas of the facility. Ratman required medication to suppress the effects of his schizophrenia, and when he got to the final 2 pills in the box, he decided to save them for when he needed a clear head. This resulted in him having full-on conversations with his companion cube, with it responding to him in conversation, although this is heavily implied to just be another part of his psyche being projected onto the thing. So why do I bring this up? Well, like I said, none of this information is available to us directly from the game itself. However, with this information in hand, it still manages to keep that sense of mystery and intrigue. The comic fleshes out the world quite a bit and explores the backstory of different elements, but it also manages to naturally develop the discussions started by the game in a new way. For example, finding Ratman's hideout in Chamber 16 sparks a completely different train of thought with this information in hand. After reading the messages about the cake being a lie and the companion cube being taken away, you may find yourself doubting Ratman's reliability since he suffers from schizophrenia. How many of his warnings are truly attempts to protect Shell from GLaDOS, and how many of them are the result of false fears and overwhelming paranoia? It's actually a really interesting dilemma, as in the comic, GLaDOS actually attempts to use Ratman's condition against him. She tells him that schizophrenia often manifests as delusions of surveillance and a belief that advanced technology is deployed against you. She even remarks, "Is it just a coincidence that you've been diagnosed with schizophrenia and now believe a homicidal computer is out to get you?" I think that this truly demonstrates just how vile, manipulative, and utterly deplorable GLaDOS can be. She honestly understands what makes human beings tick and knows how to manipulate them into achieving her goals. I like to believe that the only reason that she can't seem to get the better of us is because Shell chooses not to speak a word. GLaDOS doesn't know what she wants or how to get to her since she doesn't share anything. She tries being deceptively nice, passive-aggressive, outwardly violent, cunningly disingenuous, a childish mockery, calls her overweight, makes fun of her for being an orphan, and still doesn't get the reaction that she wants. I honestly think that this is why she hates Shell so much. She's finally met somebody that she can't manipulate. It always got me wondering as to whether GLaDOS was truly a machine that became too self-aware, or if she was something more sinister. She's so needlessly cruel that it does seem like she enjoys it some of the time. Why does she set up the test in Chamber 17 to get you attached to the companion cube, only to have you incinerate the thing at the end? Maybe it's part of a separate psychological test, but what would she have to learn from that, other than how different people handle grief? She honestly just seems to relish in making people suffer. She really tries to batter you emotionally by constantly telling you things like,
The Enrichment Center reminds you that the weighted companion cube will never threaten to stab you and, in fact, cannot speak. You euthanized your faithful companion cube more quickly than any test subject on record. Congratulations.
She really goes out of her way to humanize this lifeless cube and to get you to care about it. She designs this test to have you so reliant on it to progress that it begins to feel like, well, a companion. Her choice of words, must be euthanized, literally is defined as to put to death humanely. She could have just said, the cube must be destroyed before you can proceed, but she would much rather play mind games with you, which could well be the result of her curiosity core. When she sets Shell up against the firing range of automated turrets, they can be interacted with after being defeated, which reveals some interesting dialogue. You can occasionally hear them saying such things as,
I don't blame you.
And
No hard feelings.
despite being outwardly aggressive and firing at you on sight, even these turrets seem to attempt to guilt Shell in some way. So maybe GLaDOS is something more elevated, but then again, she could just be a cold, calculated AI that knows how best to achieve the results that she desires. Maybe she's similar to HAL 9000 from Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. After all, her primary objective is to perform tests. As we've already discussed, she can't just kill you outright, otherwise she would have nobody to complete the tests for her. The sequel does explore this a bit more since Wheatley tries to use robots to complete the tests, but this doesn't seem to scratch the itch that the system has for testing. As an AI, GLaDOS sees everything in binary, black and white. This is why the test chambers appear so clean and sterile, while the rest of the building seems to have been left to decay over time. She has no reason to care about the visual fidelity of the maintenance areas. She simply needs the test chambers to serve their function. Since she knows that people are unlikely to run tests as she would like, she achieves this through deception, whether it's pretending to be an automated, pre-recorded voice, or trying to incentivize subjects with the promise of cake. We're pretty fickle as a race, and she knows it. She uses this to her benefit and will do, or say, whatever she deems necessary to get what she wants. Portal is such a fun experience as a short little puzzle game in and of itself, but the world building and thought process that it leaves you with are truly something to behold. Portal 2 develops on this and provides much more backstory for GLaDOS and Aperture Science as a whole, but it still leaves certain things to your imagination. After all, it's simply not fun to know everything, and not everything that we know is for certain. Maybe, after everything we've come to know and understand, even GLaDOS's cake wasn't really a lie. Hello everybody, thank you very much for watching. Do leave a like down below if you did enjoy this video. Let me know what you guys think of Portal and the sort of mystery thriller aspect to it. I'm really interested to see what you guys think. If you know of any other games that have that sort of mystery aspect to it, then please let me know, because I'd be really interested to sort of try new things out. And yeah, like I said, once again, thank you guys very much for watching, and yeah, hopefully see you next time. Bye.